So you happy for me to tell them? My annual review of the pension board. But just to be clear, this is different from the annual report, which I write for the annual report and account. This is something I have to do under the terms of the Constitution. And the idea is, the objective obviously is to kind of make the board more efficient and effective in the ways we work. I hope my paper is reasonably self-explanatory, and I think I'm just going to ask for questions.
Commendably concise.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. But in which case, are you happy to approve the recommendations I made?
Yes.
Okay, right, thank you. Item 5 is the training record and feedback from any training in the last 3 months. Sure, will you read that or? Okay, sorry, fine. Mike can do that.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking. This is just the usual feedback opportunity for members of the board to talk about training that they've received since the last meeting, but also at this time of the year you get the training record. So throughout the year, any workshops or external conferences you go to, that is all recorded in the training record. The training record then informs some of the information that appears in the pension board's annual report, which then ultimately ends up as part of the fund's annual report. So hopefully everybody agrees with what's in the training record. And I think Chair's just got a question of whether anybody's got any comments to make on the top of page 16, the 4 opportunities for training since the last meeting.
Right. Should we quickly go around the room and just see? Yvonne, any comments on training?
No, I'm just trying to cast my mind back.
I gave you 10 seconds to do that.
The bonds were all great and you had a brilliant time.
Make a note of that.
I think the budget one was the one where we were kind of struggling to see the figures on the screen already, and that's come back to me. I think Carl raised that point. Yeah, it would have been good to have seen the slides beforehand. But yeah, no, I think there were 5 workshops and what I can remember, in the words of Mike.
Matthew?
Yeah, I think there were good workshops. I'm trying to think, it's quite a while back. On the budget, did they change the room venue at the last minute?
Mike?
Not that I can recall.
I can't remember whether it was that one or whether it was an earlier one, but there was at least one occasion where I turned up to County Hall, went to the supposed venue, there was nothing there. I subsequently found out from Councillor Pope and Councillor Schofield that the room venue had switched, I think, somewhere on this floor. So it was really just a plea to say if there is hybrid sessions going on or there is something going on, if the venue has to change, could that please be briefed out in an email, even if it's at the last minute? Because unfortunately, I think I turned up, found nothing there, and I was able to set myself up as you know, virtually. But it was just a slight frustration having come into County Hall and not being able to access it.
Okay, if you could note that point then, please.
I did just enter the Ribble room before I came here because it is in the calendar for the
I've got Ribble.
Well, okay, we're going to go to Carl. We're going to go to Carl next. Carl, any comments on training?
I've got no particular comments here. I mean, the budget presentation was what it was. It's very much a done deal at that stage. I guess it's of some value. It's not quite where we ideally wanted it to be. You know, I can remember the one from the previous year and some of the recommendations we made then, which were enacted and implemented. So that was positive. but I haven't been on any other kind of more trading since then.
Okay, Steve.
I was racking my brains to try and recall what happened at the valuation workshop. I looked in my diary and I wasn't there, even though I'm recorded as a picture. So I do have some catching up to do on the online training sessions.
Okay. We've got long bank holiday coming up.
Ideal.
Consider it homework.
Ideal.
And it'll be raining.
Well, I'm in Lancashire, of course it could be raining. Kevin, any?
Yes. Excuse the frog. I attended the LGPS Government Conference in January over 2 days, and the great and the good presented at it. I've got a few notes on. It's worth passing on. Very wide range of issues were covered in that couple of days. Main, to use the term that's increasingly used, the main takeaways. So it's American, that, isn't it? Yeah. Cyber security loomed as a major concern. It was reported 7 schemes already have been victims, more by being targeted, some just by being opportunistic through phishing. So it's always a developing threat. Home working increases the risks for fairly obvious reasons. And somebody said, don't let the risk register gather dust on the shelf, because you've always got to keep on the ball. You don't need to tell you that.
That comment is nodding at you.
References to ESG. Somebody's met plenty of useful information on company websites about what they're up to. I think they feel under more pressure to explain things. And also the Environment Agency was quoted as a very useful website to show all the relevant background of what they're doing and why. Again, inflation, all of this comes up later on the agenda, doesn't it? So you're obviously on the ball. Inflation is the elephant in the room. Many countries, of course, attempted to inflate their way out of debt. Where have we seen that before? Within the UK, LGPS UK still holds around £10 billion of investment, 10 billion in fossil fuels. So there's work ahead there. And the danger of stranded assets is only part of that. The actuaries, which is quite unusual, the actuaries are generally optimistic and upbeat at the moment. I mean, that's not part of their job description normally. But there you go. And also there were complaints about ministerial turnover. You look at the pensions minister, every 5 minutes it changes. There's more ministers than years.
On that point, the ministers may change, but the team underneath them has been expanded considerably.
Good point.
Which I think is probably good news, because they were desperately under-resourced beforehand.
That's a good point, yeah. Also, McLeod, it crops up later here, is looming ever closer, October 23. Well, that's not been confirmed, has it? Anyway, also mention is made of pooling, speculation on future steps and potentially more consolidation.
Is the consultation expected on that in summer 22?
Yeah. And also some alerts on pension, and again this crops up here later, on alerts on pension transfer scams. Some people say there's more of it, and some people say there's less of it, because we're on top of it. So again, always the need to be alert. But anyway, a note to myself, really, no doubt all of our officers know all of this, so none of this is news to you. But it's a very useful information sharing type conference where people genuinely tried to bring all colleagues up to date. It was a hybrid, plenty there in person. I was there online. Very useful conference.
But I think that's a reason for going for conferences. It's as much to share with other members of other pension boards and pension committees.
Yeah,
it is the networking bluntly.
Indeed, indeed. Catherine.
I just had a difficulty with not actually realising that the workshops were taking place, so I may have missed a notification of them, but normally I write them all down in my diary. And normally when they're announced, I send an email straight back to Mike saying I intend to be there. So I'm sorry I didn't attend to them. I know, but yeah.
Recordings are in the library though.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, you've always
if you find yourself at the loose end.
If I can, yes. Bank holiday.
Right. Anything else, Anthony? Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to mention a practical point. Would it help if we sent calendar invites out for the workshops? and then it's in your
Very much so.
diary.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Oh, I thought there was a facility on it, but I don't use one of those, sorry.
Yeah, I think we've done that when there were online workshops, because obviously you needed some kind of link, but now that they're going to more of a hybrid, just to keep things clear, it might help. To
Maybe,
send
yeah,
them
yeah,
advice.
okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else on training? No? Right. Do you want to make any comment on the training record? It seems to me that all members have undergone training, and I don't think there's any matter of concern there.
No. Obviously, there have been, over the last 12 months, less opportunities given the impact of COVID. So hopefully, maybe as we move forward, we'll be able to offer up some more opportunities and get back to a more sort of normal standard.
Okay, right. Item 6 then. This is my annual report, which will go into the report and accounts. I don't propose to kind of comment on it here, but if there are any questions, now is the time to raise them. And that's really, if you think I've got anything wrong, I've missed anything out. I've been rude about anybody. That has happened before.
Oh, you edited it, did you?
Not this again, it has happened before. Okay, in which case, are you happy to approve that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Now, item 7, this is the kind of standard regulatory update, which is the meat of what Kevin was talking about.
I'm going to channel Colin Smith while I do this.
Okay, so Judy, please run it. I wouldn't go through it absolutely every item, just bring up the main points.
So, item 1, the contribution bandings. Employers must reassess employee contribution rates on the 1st of April, and then they may reassess again during the year based on these bandings, which have increased by CPI from April 22. So that's the first item. Item 2 is about the automatic enrolment cover. It'll be remaining at 10,000 for 22-23, which is a real term decrease, and it's expected that an extra 17,000 people will be brought in as a result of the freeze. Next item is about Prudential. I don't know if there's any questions. There are still issues with Prudential. Since the system changes, there are still concerns about delays in finding fund values, etc. So we are keeping an eye on it, and a new client manager we're hoping for. So that should hopefully help, because we haven't had the regular meetings that we had probably up to 18 months ago. We haven't been having those regular meetings, so it would be good to get those back on the table again.
It's probably worth mentioning that it's not as severe as it was this time last year in terms of the impact.
Can I ask when the new potential client manager is, because it seems to be imminent, but do we know when?
I don't have to. I sent an email chase yesterday to Alistair Hogger, I think is fairly senior at Prudential, and he'd been talking to Colin about allocating somebody. So I chased him yesterday, but I'm just waiting for a response on that. So.
Okay, it just, I don't know, it seems almost slightly concerning if they've not been maybe showing as much urgency as they should do. I don't know if there's anything we can say or do about that. But
Bottom line is, I'm afraid the LGPS isn't terribly important to the crew, and we've got very few alternatives.
Hopefully I'll have a positive update next time. Single code of practice. I think Jane will try going to talk a little bit more about that. There's a project on the pension fund team to look at an impact assessment for single code of practice, which is due to come in October 22.
So if I just jump in there, so we'll bring that assessment to the next meeting of the board. So Junaid and Mukhtar have gone through the single code of practice, looked at the impact assessment, how it would affect the fund. Probably the key headline takeaway would be that cybersecurity is something that we need to look at in more detail. So there'll be some action points to arise from that, and we can run through it with you next time.
I mean, one of those actions is a workshop in July where we'll be doing a bit of presentation and LPP will be presenting how they manage that.
And this will come up, I think, in all our meetings, because clearly this will change some of the regulations under which we, it's not regulations, sorry, some of the what's the word? Not actually regulations.
Regulations?
Regulations under which we operate. So it is important.
I'm going to skip a couple unless there's any questions, but item 8 is about the stronger nudge consultation regulations. So from the 1st of June 2022, schemes are required to offer pension-wise appointments to scheme members with ABCs who are transferring or taking retirement benefits unless the member opts out of the grant. And LPP are working on the implementation of that.
Sorry, did I miss 5, 6 and 7?
I was just trying not to go through every single one.
Oh, okay, fine.
There's my fault.
Thank you. That's okay.
So, did you have a question on 5, 6 or 7?
I just wondered if you had anything to add, that was all, no, other than what's on here.
I don't think there's anything to add, it was just to summarise it really, so if you have any questions.
Okay.
I'll skip the CPI unless there's any questions, and the item 10 is about the Finance Act. Finance Act 2022. So, as received already sent, and this is about allowing the deadlines to be extended for annual allowance and scheme pays, reporting requirements, so it's setting things up for when the cloud comes in and benefits might be recalculated, which might affect annual allowance and scheme pays. So item 11 is about the cloud. So the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Officers Bill now has royal assent, which paves the way for the LGPS regulations to be amended. LGA have said that they expect the regulations to come into force now from the 1st of October 2023. I think it was previously said that it would be earlier than that. LPPA are waiting for the final regulations, but have completed some planning and preparation by checking data and asking employees to confirm that there's no data gaps. And I think Lancashire has been in a good position because it's got monthly data collection files. It's been asking for the changes in hours and service history that it's going to need to be able to do the recalculations. Item 12 is about dashboards. LGA responded to that consultation that the proposed deadline of April 2024 is too ambitious, especially given the cloud and what state of the recalculation is going to be in at that time. So they've suggested a date instead of, they've said that April 2025 is more realistic. And item 13 is a follow-up to the new transfer out requirements that were introduced in November 2021. Where schemes need to assess credit conditions are met to allow the transfer to take place, and when there's any red or amber flags. There's likely to be minor amendments to that. I think it's about overseas transfers and making it possibly slightly easier to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed for running through that. Any questions on any of those items? There was a lot there.
Do we have any concerns over the single code of practice that the LGPS is one of, well, as far as I know, the only public service scheme that is also funded? Whether the rules will be a bit sort of lowest common denominator and not as specific as the code of practice 14 that we have?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge which you probably encountered as the guys have gone through the impact assessment, because there was sometimes ambiguity as to which provisions would apply to LGPS compared to a occupational scheme. The regulator has indicated that they're going to be a bit clearer in the final guidance that they give, and I think as we work through it, we can identify what we think will impact us, and if there's a bit of ambiguity, sort of think through the rationale as to why it would impact us and whether it's appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
But it's a fair point, and it's been one of the reasons there's been a lot of quite a bit of pushback from the LGPS on the single code of practice for exactly that reason.
there was a reason for having one in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does help that there's lots of support that is given through, you know, webinars and things like that with consultancy firms where a lot of the thinking has been done. We do a lot of the thinking from the point of view of the fund, but it's always useful to sense check it and make sure that we're in line with our peers. So that's quite a good route of
Okay.
getting assurance on those points.
Right, good, thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you very much indeed for that, Julie. I think we're asked to note that, aren't we? We happy to note that? Yeah. Okay, super. Item 8 is the breaches report. Just for the benefit of the public listening in, I'd just like to make the point, because we did have a kind of rather a journalistic comment last time asking why were the breaches. Any fund of this size will have breaches. And I'd be much more worried if there were no breaches reported to this board. It is just a fact that the size and number of transactions, it is inevitable that sometimes people will get things slightly wrong. So just want to make absolutely clear for the benefit of the public. Right, having said that, I'm going to pass over to Junaid to...
Well, I'll start off with the contribution breaches, and same trend as the last quarter, same contractor breach, missed payment. So we are actively liaising with that contractor in order to recover that payment. It is one of the last payments that contractor is going to make as it existed the scheme, so it shouldn't be a big problem to recover this, as they do have a large surplus, which we can take the payment off if needed. Moving on to the data breaches. So there were 4 data breaches in January and none in February and March. The ones in January, it was an online account that had been incorrectly linked to another member. One member that was unhappy that the retirement form was sent to a work email, and emails from one employer was incorrectly sent to another, and a data extract was sent to Lancashire County Council, which was meant for another authority. Any questions on that before moving on?
Yeah, Matthew.
It just seems in terms of the person who the retirement forms were sent to their works email, I mean, that's obviously, you can see why that's a sensitive issue. I was just wondering, is that sort of the case where they've only provided one email and it's the works email, or what sort of measures would there be? Just because you could see there will be plenty of cases where people are thinking about retirement and they haven't yet had that full conversation. So I'm just wondering what sort of checks we have in place for that sort of situations.
So a lot of the information that is, it doesn't entirely depend on what email address a member registered their member self-service account to. So they could have registered the member self-service account to using their works email. However, for this particular what's classed as this breach, we haven't got the detail behind what actually occurred. So we can maybe revert back to LPP and ask them the questions as to what happened around this particular breach.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe just a thought of whether there could be a question when people sign up. I don't know, just something to flag up that it could be sensitive, and at such a time as you do want to initiate the retirement process, that make sure that this sort of thing couldn't happen.
Steve.
Could I ask about contribution incidents? Of course, well, they seem unrealistically low, even for 2 months.
Small employer. It was a small employer that was with dwindling active members that has now actually left the scheme, so they've become an existing employer. I think there are only a couple of employees.
Sorry, can't hear the reply.
I think there are only a couple of employees for that employer, so the employee contribution for 1 month wasn't a huge.
Sorry, I think you were on about the incidents, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah. The incidents. So it's not got all the data in for the whole quarter yet, because we missed March.
But even for 2 months, it seems very
yeah,
low.
it still seems quite low, but that's the data our finance team have provided us with.
They have got new staff though, relatively new, so we'll have to.
So the point William was making, he'd be more concerned about understatements.
Yeah, that is lower than we've ever had it for quite some number of years and quarters.
We'd much rather see it than not see it.
We'll double check that.
Any other points on the breaches?
Can I just ask about the ABC value breach? I'm raising it because obviously there's some concerns around Prudential at the moment. How are these breaches actually identified? How are they detected? You know, is it conceivable that, you know, somebody could, an ABC valuation could go undetected and then a person's not paid the right pension for many, many years? Yeah, are the processes in place to detect these?
It is something that we'd have to pick up with LPP. I mean, when a member does have an ABC, they do have an online account which they can check the fund value, keep on top of the fund value. So if a member did that regularly, then they probably would be able to identify if there was a shortfall in their payment received at retirement. However, it is possible that the incorrect value will be paid if the appropriate checks aren't done.
Yeah. I think, as you say, there's a number of points where you'd be receiving that information, you know, be it quotes, final payment, so you could see if there had been an inadvertent incorrect number used at one particular point. What we can check with is around, you know, how automated that process is and where the risks lie, and get a better understanding of that.
I mean, I am hearing from colleagues that the online accounts that Prudential have doesn't work, you know, and that the frequency of updates on their own contributions is not where it needs to be. So I think that is a heightened risk.
I think that relates to what we discussed at the start around the problems with Prudential, which they have improved compared to last year, but there's probably some members who may still need to be corrected.
Could you raise, when you talk to the new client rep, could you please just make sure they're aware of the
Yeah, we will do.
Mine's about a month behind, not that I'm an obsessive checker or anything, but
yeah,
my true account is okay.
Okay.
So,
any other comments?
Sorry, I was just going to say that we've already touched on the administrative breaches, but so there wasn't much to add. So if anybody's got any final questions.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Are we happy to note the breaches report? Yeah. Okay, super. Right, item 9 is the Part 1 reports presented to the Pension Fund Committee in March. And I think the ones that I kind of picked out were the fund budget and strategic plan, the death grants, which we did discuss at our last meeting, and the RI report and dashboard were kind of finally approved. Again, we have discussed that earlier. Does anybody wish to make any comments or ask questions about any of those reports?
I just had written down about the death grants policy from last time, but Sean's answered it. It's just that query.
Yeah.
And perhaps just some points to pick up on. We agreed the strategic plan at the Pension Fund Committee, so you will have seen from that there's quite a lot of initiatives on the go. And in fact, we're interviewing next week for an additional role on the team, special projects lead, because there's quite a lot of change that we need to implement, and having someone who specialises in that will be really helpful. In terms of the type of initiatives that you'll see at the pension board, we've got local pension board support and succession planning, which we mentioned ahead of the meeting today, single code of practice, which we've touched on, cybersecurity, also the communication strategy work, which we can touch on later, and admin related work. And obviously the one that's the highest priority this year has got to be the valuation, because that's a legislative requirement and really important for employers. The only other thing I was going to pick up on was the training plan. So you'll be aware of the needs analysis because you completed questionnaires. We looked at future change that was on the horizon, as well as analysis from the local pension boards interviews that Chair you held with the members. So they've been really good inputs, and we've used that to identify what workshops we should have. But one other thing that we've been looking at is a product that Hyman's, a consultancy firm, offer in the area of training, and it's called an academy. The only thing is that there would be a cost to that, and what we need to think about now is what the cost benefit is, and it would be helpful if we could have some volunteers from the board to sit in on a demo from Hyman's of the product and just get a feel if you think it would be useful and if you'd engage with it. And we'd also ask some committee members to do that as well, and then we can take it away and think about, is it something that we want to proceed with, and would it be helpful for everyone?
I assume this is online training?
Yes. So this,
Right.
the demo will be online,
And the actual training?
The tool is actually online. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'd still have workshops, we'd supplement it with the workshops, but this would cover more generic content around pensions and LGPS. Covers some of the topics that you might get from the TPR toolkit, but it does a lot more than that, and also I think the way it presents it is a bit more engaging. So it is quite an interesting product that might be useful for us.
So if I could just put a plea out, maybe to come back to Sean if you're able to help by acting as a guinea pig for.
I'll gladly do so.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I just ask, Chair?
Yeah.
I mean, do we know if other pension funds are using this already?
Yes.
What sort of feedback there is
So,
from it?
I haven't had massive feedback from other pension funds, but we do know that there's approximately, well, the latest message that went out, there's 30 other funds using it. So there is quite a number. A lot of the funds that possibly will use it already buy into actuarial services from Hyman's, but any fund is welcome to purchase this.
Thanks.
Thank you. So if people could just come back to, members could come back to Sean and say if they are willing to help with this. I'm happy to volunteer.
Okay.
My name done. Lead from the front, they say. Right, we've commented on item 9. And is there anything else anybody wishes to raise on that? No? Okay.
Anything on the responsible investment report?
Sorry,
Anything on the responsible investment report or dashboard?
this is going to come up later in the year. People are very welcome to make comments if you'd like to.
No.
We did discuss it before and thought about how the situation has changed quite a lot over the past few months.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting in the next report how that looks. That'll go to the Pension Fund Committee in June, and we can talk about it in July.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right, in which case I think we're at the end of item. So as item 10, is there any urgent business? I haven't been informed of any. No? Okay, right. In which case, sorry, item 11 is the date of the next meeting, which is the 5th of July. Yeah, so we could just note that, please. In which case, I'm on to item 12, which is the exclusion of the press and public. And before we do that, because we have to have a little break, both to turn off the public stream, but also because we have to dial in Jo.
Jo should be physically present.
Oh, right, okay. So
hopefully she'll be outside.
Okay,
maybe in a couple of minutes.
Even better, right, okay. We don't know. Well, in which case, does anybody need a comfort break? I did promise to put one in.
I wouldn't mind.
Okay, fine. We'll have a 5-minute break.